Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Chad is out, Sudan is in. Jamina expresses bewilderment over being included in a new open-ended US travel ban by the Trump administration. Khartoum, those removed from Washington's list of travel restrictions. Also, tense calm returns to Togo. Plans for more anti-government marches have been called off, but the political standoff over presidential term limits between Faure Gnassingbé's ministers and the opposition continues. And it's a country with one of the world's highest teen pregnancy rates. A sex education drive in Tanzania is trying to encourage communities to think twice before ostracizing unmarried mothers. But first, Chad's government saying that it's astonished at Washington's decision to add its name to a list of countries whose nationals are banned from entering the US. Rights groups have fiercely condemned the new open-ended restrictions brought in by the Trump administration. The new look crackdown comes in as the previous 90-day ban on 6 mainly Muslim countries comes to an end. And critics say the intent is still overwhelmingly to prevent Muslim visitors from heading to the US.
It's a radical measure. All Chadian nationals will be barred from entering the United States. What is surprising is that Washington says Idriss Déby's Chad remains an important partner in the struggle against terrorists. But the US adds that N'Djamena does not share enough information about terrorists. The Chadian government reacted strongly.
We take note of this decision, but the Chadian government cannot comprehend the official reasons backing this decision.
In the streets of the capital, many Chadians were stunned.
I'm very shocked. I don't understand this decision. After all the efforts Chad has made in the struggle against terrorists,
my advice to the Chadian government is that it should now ban Americans from coming here.
Washington says jihadist groups like Boko Haram are operating in Chad. The Trump administration decision surprised some observers because Chad has been at the forefront of the struggle against jihadists, especially in Mali and Nigeria.
Well, the White House's executive order also removes Sudan from the restriction list. After having been part of the original travel ban, Khartoum was recently praised by the US for its efforts in fighting terrorism. That comes ahead of a decision expected in October on whether Washington will lift decades-old sanctions on Sudan, and it has, in the meantime, vowed to step up efforts to normalize relations with the US.
I think this decision is no doubt in the best interest of Sudan. I think it will be followed by other positive decisions with regards to Sudan.
There's no guarantee America will remove Sudan from the list. That's because Trump's policies are unclear.
I think Sudan took good, serious steps in the framework of normalizing relations with the United States and the international community. So I consider Trump's move a good one, especially for the Sudanese people who have suffered under the unilateral sanctions imposed on them.
Look now at some news in brief. The Ethiopian government says that hundreds of people have been killed in ethnic clashes between Oromo and Somali communities in the east of the country. Historic tensions have been caused by a struggle for controlling arable resources along the shared border. Earlier this month, fresh protests erupted after 2 Oromia officials were arrested and later killed by Somali regional forces. The only woman to try and run in Rwanda's elections last month is facing treason charges. Diana Rwigara was arrested again last Friday and has been under investigation over alleged forgery of signatures to endorse her candidacy. Authorities are now levelling allegations of incitement to revolt. Rwigara is a fierce critic of the government and denies all charges. She claims that she's been the victim of political persecution. On Monday, Zimbabwean activist pastor Evan Mawarire pled not guilty to charges of trying to overthrow the government. He'd been arrested at a church service the day before after posting a video online highlighting the country's economic troubles. Mawarire was behind the This Flag protest movement that erupted last year in condemnation of inequality and graft. Well, political deadlock continues in Togo, where the ruling party and the opposition coalition are locked in a standoff over presidential term limits. The government says it plans on organising a referendum to limit the number of mandates to 2. However, the non-retroactive reform could allow Faure Gnassingbé to stand again, despite already having been in power for 12 years. Our correspondents report.
Relative calm has returned to Lomé after last week's anti-government protests. In Bé, a working-class neighbourhood and a traditionally pro-opposition district of the capital, life has come back to normal. Many residents took part in the opposition rallies and remain mobilised.
Whatever protests take place, we will take part. We want the head of state to leave. Even if we risk being beaten or killed, we are ready. He can't kill all the Togolese people.
No one should stay in power for so long. Nothing works. We're suffering too much.
Here in Agoe, another district where protests were held, the pro-government Youth Movement for Peace decided to hold a race to promote peace in the country, as this activist explains.
Peace is under threat as long as opposition forces try to put pressure on the population by saying that unless President Faure leaves, something will happen in this country. But without peace, he can't really leave.
The political standoff between the ruling party and the opposition shows no sign of abating. The coalition's announced it will hold a Memorial Day this week and says it remains determined.
Slow and steady wins the race. We have a whole program to implement, but we cannot act as if no one died this week.
The government is confident of a favourable outcome to the political crisis.
Everyone was ready to hold talks at the National Assembly, but some walked out. Is that the right solution? They can go around the world, but they'll end up back here sitting with us and ready to finally talk.
Massive protests have erupted since last August to demand a return to the 1992 constitution and for the departure of the president, whose family has been in power in Togo for 50 years.
French bank BNP Paribas is the subject of a full-scale inquiry into allegations of complicity in the 1994 Rwandan genocide. It's accused of complicity over a transfer of over $1 million to an arms dealer during the crisis. A preliminary investigation began earlier this year. The announcement of the probe by judicial investigators doesn't imply guilt, but does suggest that the complaint has merit. The UN's working with organisations in Tanzania to try and encourage communities to take a more sympathetic approach to unmarried mothers. It's part of a sex education drive in a country that has one of the world's highest teen pregnancy rates. Girls, boys and their families are all being approached in the programme.
Lucy is a cartoon figure, but she faces the same problems as real Tanzanian girls. In this episode, she's pregnant and afraid. The goal of the show is to explain to young men the problems young women have so they know how to help. It's one of the initiatives funded by a program that aims to improve sexual education in Tanzania.
For the boys or for the girls?
Boys and girls.
And for us, we fit in by covering the area of influencing or educating men and boys to participate in SRH issues.
SRH, or sexual reproductive health, a major issue in Tanzania. The pregnancy rate among teenage girls is among the highest in the world there. 21% of those aged 15 to 19 have already given birth. NGOs backed by the UN Population Fund try to spread information using art, concerts, and new media.
It's also going to help increasing access to sexual reproductive health, but also addressing some of the bottlenecks which are affecting the provision of sexual and reproductive health, information, education, and services.
NGOs have to face opposition from authorities who wish to keep pregnant girls on the sidelines. President Magufuli says he wants to ban all of them from schools, accusing them of being immoral. 55,000 girls have been expelled in the past decade.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks very much for joining us. Do so again. Take care.